My childhood sweetheart Ethan, and I have a daughter from the future. She has traveled back to the present. She said that in the future, not only did I abuse her, but I also cheated on Ethan. Later, I even abandoned both of them and eloped with a wealthy man. So she'd rather erase her own existence than let me end up with her dad. I watched her trying so hard to set Ethan up with other girls and couldn't help but laugh coldly inside. She had no idea that I already knew the future. On our way home from school, a girl pulled me and Ethan into an alley behind the school gate. The girl was pretty but seemed a bit off, insisting on calling us mom and dad. After a long pause, I reached out to touch her forehead. "Hey, are you okay?" She impatiently swatted my hand away, then continued looking at Ethan with teary eyes. "Dad, I'm telling the truth. I'm really your daughter from the future." Ethan looked at her with exasperation. "If you're sick, go see a doctor." He grabbed my hand to leave. But the girl quickly grabbed his uniform, speaking rapidly. "Isn't your phone password Scarlett's birthday? Don't you have a journal where you write down everything Scarlett likes? Aren't you planning to confess to her on her birthday?" I froze, secretly glancing at Ethan beside me. The usually proud and arrogant boy was blushing unconsciously. He shot me a quick look and said through gritted teeth, "How do you know that?" The girl looked somewhat smug. "Because I'm your most beloved daughter." I hadn't paid close attention before, but now, carefully examining the girl's delicate features, I realized her eyes were indeed very similar to Ethan's. A thought struck me, and I asked her, "What's your name?" The girl didn't seem to like talking to me much. She answered perfunctorily, "Evelyn Shong." Hearing this name, my heart suddenly raced, because I had once fantasized that if I really married Ethan Shong in the future and had a daughter, I would name her Evelyn Shong. It symbolizes never forgetting our love and the hope that Scarlett and Ethan would stay in love forever, even when their hair turns white. Looking at Evelyn's vivid expressions, an indescribable bitterness stirred in my heart. Unconsciously, I reached out to Evelyn, wanting to touch her hair, but she dodged. When the girl's gaze swept over me, it carried obvious disgust. "Dad, can you please stop liking Scarlett?" Her tone was filled with genuine hatred. "You treated her so well, but she was still unsatisfied. In the future, she not only abused me but also cheated on you with a rich man. When you found out, they even injured you." Ethan and I were both stunned. Perhaps because Evelyn spoke with such sincerity, Ethan unconsciously immersed himself in the emotions. He instinctively retorted, "Impossible, Scarlett is a very good girl." Evelyn looked exasperated. "I'm the one who traveled through time. I know exactly what kind of person she is. You just like her too much now, that's why you're missing out on your true love." As Ethan was about to continue arguing with her, a gentle voice came from the mouth of the alley. Ethan." When Ethan saw who it was, his handsome face instantly turned cold. But Evelyn's eyes lit up. "Aunt Mia." I followed their gazes and saw Mia standing at the entrance of the alley. She wore an oversized school uniform, her thick glasses almost covering half her face. When she spoke, not only did she have a strong accent, but her braces were also visible. Everyone's first impression of her was that she was very unremarkable. But it was this Mia who did something beyond anyone's imagination. She once publicly confessed to Ethan at the school basketball game. At that time, Ethan politely rejected her. But this incident became a topic of gossip among the students of number 1 high school. Everyone secretly ridiculed her for not knowing her place, being ugly, and having unrealistic dreams. Originally, everyone thought Mia would give up after that, but unexpectedly, she persisted. From then on, wherever Ethan appeared, Mia could be seen. Later, Ethan got annoyed by her clinginess and started giving her the cold shoulder, sometimes even mocking her. But Mia still didn't leave and continued to pursue him. At this moment, Ethan didn't give her a good look either. He pulled my hand and was about to walk out. But when we passed Mia, she grabbed his sleeve. Ethan looked at her hand, frowning slightly. Mia immediately let go and carefully took out 2 movie tickets from her bag. "Ethan, this weekend, can I treat you to a movie? Just consider it a thank you for helping me last time." Mia came from a poor family. Plus, with her unique accent, she was often mocked as a country bumpkin at school. At first it was just verbal attacks, but after confessing to Ethan, she completely angered the leader of a group of girls who had a crush on him. So the leader started bullying Mia with her clique. When Ethan found out, he sternly warned the leader, which finally made them stop. Ethan didn't take Mia's movie tickets, but instead raised his eyebrows and asked, "You're already struggling to pay your tuition, why are you wasting money on movie tickets?" Mia's face turned red as she softly said, "This is the money I earned from part-time jobs these past few days." Ethan was taken aback. He awkwardly averted his gaze and said stiffly, "I'm busy. It's Scarlett's birthday this weekend." The moment Ethan led me out of the alley, I looked back. I saw Evelyn stomping her feet in frustration, while Mia was staring intently at my hand held by Ethan. In her eyes, I saw thick jealousy, unwillingness, and even hatred. There was nothing I could do. As Ethan's childhood friend, not only had I known him for a long time, but my family background and appearance also matched his. So I was often used as a tool to humiliate Mia. But I didn't like that. After warning them many times, they finally stopped comparing me to Mia. Mia also approached me once. She told me I was just lucky, and if she had my background and looks, she could definitely stand by Ethan's side too. At that time, I was thinking about how to solve a math problem in my head, but I still maintained a smile and replied to her, Mia, instead of telling me this, why don't you go back and do a few more practice problems? Since you can't change your innate conditions, why not change your future through your own efforts? Unfortunately, my heartfelt words were misunderstood by Mia as me humiliating her for her poor grades. From then on, she disliked me even more. My thoughts returned to the present as we reached the bottom of my apartment building. Before parting, I asked Ethan what he thought about Evelyn's situation. He arrogantly said, does she think just because her last name is Shang, she can pretend to be my daughter? Then, he secretly glanced at me, his ears turning slightly red. Besides, our future daughter wouldn't badmouth you like that. She'd definitely be well behaved, just like you. My heart felt sweet. I thought, maybe I was just being too sensitive. Does time travel really exist in this world? Maybe that name was just a coincidence. Perhaps because I experienced such a bizarre event today, I also had a strange dream that night. In my dream, I was sitting at an unfamiliar dressing table, holding a phone, and about to send a message. I saw a person saved as Jasper Sia send a message, run away with me. And the message I had typed but not sent was, okay. I felt everything was too absurd. I abruptly looked up and caught my own reflection in the mirror. The woman's features were still beautiful, but deep fatigue lingered on her face, as if she had been through a catastrophe. But before I could clearly see my surroundings, I was awakened by my alarm clock. Time to get up for school. I sighed, thinking to myself that I must be going crazy. This weekend, my friends gathered to celebrate my birthday. After dinner, we were about to go sing karaoke. While looking forward to Ethan's birthday gift, I couldn't help but wonder if he would confess to me today. But Ethan was clearly distracted today, occasionally checking his watch. When it suddenly started thundering and raining outside, he irritably went out to make a phone call. But when he came back, he still sat there lost in thought. My previously cheerful mood instantly dissipated by half. I really wanted to ask him, didn't he say he didn't care about Mia's invitation at all? So why was he acting like this now? My best friend Tiffany noticed the tension between us. She immediately picked a romantic duet and laughingly urged us to sing together. Ethan snapped out of it and looked at me tenderly. May this humble knight Ethan have the honor of inviting Princess Scarlet to sing a song. This was a game we often played as kids. Ethan would play the knight who slayed the dragon, and I'd be the kidnapped princess. Every time he rescued me, he'd shamelessly demand a kiss. My mood improved a little and I nodded. But just as Ethan and I started singing, someone suddenly barged in. It was Evelyn. Looking at her rain-soaked clothes, I inexplicably felt a pang of heartache. Ignoring everyone's surprised gazes, Evelyn quickly walked up to Ethan and said, Dad, go save Mia. Mia now. She's been caught by her dad's creditors and is in danger. Ethan froze for a second. Before Evelyn could react, he immediately ran out. My mind went blank for a moment, but my feet honestly chased after him. It was pouring outside. I struggled to keep up with Ethan, loudly calling his name. But he never looked back, running faster and faster. Suddenly, I accidentally tripped and fell. Something cut my calf. Blood dripped into the cold rainwater and quickly dissipated. I gritted my teeth and stood up, cursing Ethan for being an idiot for not bringing an umbrella. But why didn't I bring one either? I sadly realized that I was just as much of an idiot as him. However, when I finally reached the entrance of the movie theater with my injured leg, I discovered that I was the only true idiot. I watched as Ethan knocked down all the debt collectors. I watched as he pulled Mia into his arms, holding her tightly. Finally, I watched as he took off his jacket and draped it over their heads, and then they ran away together. Suddenly, an umbrella appeared over my head. I stared at Evelyn Shang standing beside me, stunned. The girl's face seemed a bit blurry in the night, but her tone was sarcastic. See that? That's my dad's true love. What are you? I didn't mind her words, but instead asked, aren't you cold? Evelyn froze. After looking at me for a while, she forcefully shoved the umbrella into my hands. You're such a stupid woman. With that, she ran off into the heavy rain. I stood there, holding the umbrella, feeling a bit at a loss. The umbrella handle still held the warmth left by Evelyn, but it was quickly dissipating in the cool breeze, just like my mood, gradually turning cold. At this moment, an unfamiliar car stopped beside me. The window rolled down, revealing the face of my best friend Tiffany. She said, "Scarlett, get in the car, quick." My clothes were just soaked through by the rain, and I hesitated, worried about getting the car seat wet. But Tiffany urged me anxiously, so I had no choice but to open the car door and climb in. "Thank you, Tiffany." I had just come back to my senses from what had happened. Tiffany said impatiently, "Do we really need to say thank you to each other? And if you want to thank someone, thank my uncle. It's a good thing he came to pick me up, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to catch up with you." So I quickly thanked the middle-aged man in the driver's seat, but unexpectedly, Tiffany burst out laughing. "You got it wrong, Scarlett. Uncle Chen is our family driver. My uncle is the one sitting in the passenger seat." Confused, I looked at the young man sitting in the passenger seat. From this angle, I could only see his tense side profile. "Thank you." I felt a bit embarrassed. The young man didn't seem very happy, his tone cold. "It's nothing." Tiffany winked at me and whispered, "Don't mind him, Scarlett. He's like this to everyone, always walking around with a cold face as if someone owes him 8 million. I pressed my lips together, not knowing what to say, but the young man in the front seat spoke up indifferently, "Tiffany, if you don't want me to tell my brother about you failing this exam, shut up." Tiffany made a face at him, and was about to say something when she saw my bleeding calf. "Oh my, Scarlett, what happened to your leg? How did you bleed so much?" I wanted to say it's nothing, but Tiffany's uncle immediately said to Uncle Chen, "Go to the hospital." At the hospital, the doctor carefully cleaned the wound on my leg and prescribed some medicine. When Tiffany went to get the medicine, her uncle and I waited in the lobby. The lobby was crowded, with almost no place to sit. My legs started aching from standing for too long, so I could only stand on one foot to the side. At this moment, an arm suddenly extended in front of me. I looked at Tiffany's uncle in surprise, only to see him turning his head to the side, not looking at me, his tone a bit awkward. "You can lean on me." I didn't feel awkward at all, and thanked him frankly before taking his arm. After a while like this, he suddenly spoke up again, "Scarlett, do you really not remember me?" Under the light, I could clearly see Tiffany's uncle's entire face. His features were like a work of art meticulously crafted by an artist, exquisite and perfect, but his dark pupils seemed unable to reflect any light, always carrying a hint of coldness. I carefully searched my memory but found that apart from Tiffany, he and I seemed to have no other connection. And Tiffany rarely mentioned her family. I didn't even know her uncle was so young until tonight. So, I looked at him with some confusion. The young man lowered his eyes, seeming a bit disappointed. He said, "Qingqiao High School, third debater for the opposition." Like a sudden realization, I remembered the debate competition I participated in last year as a representative of our school at Qingqiao High School. Our number 1 high school happened to be up against the host school Qingqiao. Although the third debater on the other side didn't say much, every sentence hit the key points. Of course, I didn't back down either, and in the end, that debate turned into a confrontation between the two of us. I remember the name of the third debater was. I tried calling his name, Jasper Xie. The young man finally showed a smile, as if ice and snow had started melting. But I couldn't smile, because I suddenly remembered that dream. Jasper Xie seems to be my affair partner in the future. When Tiffany and her uncle dropped me off at home, Tiffany pulled me aside, very worried. "Scarlett, what exactly happened between you and Ethan?" I thought of Ethan running away with Mia, and my heart ached as if pierced by needles. I forced a smile at Tiffany and told her it was nothing, but only I knew that I had started feeling threatened by Mia, whom I had never paid attention to before. Perhaps because I got caught in the rain, I started running a high fever that night. In a daze, I had another strange dream. In a gloomy room, not a single ray of sunshine could penetrate, and I fell to the ground, watching in despair as the obviously more mature Ethan walked out. I don't know how long had passed, but someone pulled me up. That person's hand was obviously smaller than mine, but their palm was incredibly warm. She took me downstairs and pushed me into someone's embrace. That person's arms were filled with a faint orange scent. For some reason, this scent inexplicably made me feel very secure. When I woke up again, 2 days had passed. My mother was by my side, her eyes full of worry. Only after I said I was fine did she relax and hand me the porridge she had cooked. As I was eating, I suddenly noticed a beautifully packaged box on the bedside table. My mother told me, "I don't know what's wrong with you kids. That day, after you came back and collapsed, little Lee also came over in a mess. When he found out you had a fever, he stayed by your bedside and took care of you for a night. No one could make him leave. This box is what he left behind, saying it's a birthday present for you." I remained silent, not saying anything. When my mother went to wash the dishes, I opened the box and saw an intricately crafted necklace inside. The crystal swan on the necklace sparkled under the light. This was a necklace I had seen when Ethan and I went out to play last time, but I didn't buy it in the end because it was too expensive. I remember I didn't show that I liked it very much at the time, only sneaking a few extra glances at it. So how did Ethan know? The next day, as soon as I stepped out the door, I saw Ethan standing at the entrance of my house. He smiled at me cautiously, then handed me a cup of soy milk. But I didn't take it and walked straight past him downstairs without giving him a single glance. Ethan quickly caught up with me and tried to take my school bag. Of course I wouldn't give him my bag, so we started tugging at it in the street. In a fit of anger, I simply let go. Ethan lost control and fell on his butt. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Seeing me laugh, Ethan immediately scrambled up to my side and said softly, "I'm sorry, Scarlett. It was my fault. I shouldn't have left you there that day, and I shouldn't have not heard you calling me from behind. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. If you're really angry, just hit me." At the end, his expression turned a bit aggrieved. "Just don't ignore me. I can't stand you ignoring me." I looked at him for a while, my tone indifferent, but I also saw you hug Mia. Ethan immediately got anxious. He tugged at my sleeve and explained, "I saw how scared she was, so I just wanted to comfort her. I really don't have any other intentions towards her." Seeing my expression getting colder, Ethan grabbed my hand, his tone pleading, "I really was wrong, Scarlett. You know, you're the one I've always liked and you're the one I want to marry." I froze because this was the first time Ethan said these things to me. In the past, although our feelings for each other were an open secret, we still lacked a substantive confession. I had always wanted to hear him say he likes me in person, but now that I finally heard it, I didn't feel as happy as I imagined. It was probably still because of what happened that day. I sighed, not paying him any more attention, and turned to leave. Ethan followed behind me, holding my school bag. This was the first time we didn't joke around on our way to school. When we reached the school gate, I saw Tiffany getting out of the car. Seeing the strange atmosphere between me and Ethan, she was smart enough not to ask. I linked arms with her, but just happened to see Jasper sitting inside the car the moment the door closed. His gaze was still very cold, especially after seeing Ethan beside me. His displeasure was almost overflowing. I suddenly became curious. Just how did my future self and Jasper develop to the point of wanting to elope? Time flew by. Ethan and I seemed to have returned to our original state. Perhaps it was because we had been together since we were young, having integrated each other into our daily lives long ago. It wasn't so easy to break away. However, I could clearly feel my feelings for Ethan fading bit by bit. When exactly did I realize it? Probably starting from when Mia hadn't come to school for a long time. I saw Ethan often staring off into space towards the classroom door during breaks, subconsciously searching for someone's figure after playing basketball, and even unintentionally writing Mia's name on paper. But after writing it, he would angrily crumple the paper into a ball and throw it in the trash can. Habits are truly a terrifying thing. For example, I was used to Ethan always being by my side, and Ethan was now used to Mia following behind him, refusing to leave no matter how much he tried to chase her away. Seeing him so conflicted and lost, I really wanted to tell him, "If you care so much, just go find her." And my feelings aren't something cheap either. When Ethan completely exhausts them, I will definitely leave without any hesitation. Although that's what I thought, my heart still ached. The incident happened on an afternoon. I was reading a book under the gardenia tree next to the school's sports field when Ethan came to me, filled with anger. As I recall, he rarely got angry with me. The few times he did were because I didn't listen to him and got myself hurt. But this time was different. It was because of Mia. Ethan threw Mia's diary at my feet and demanded, "Scarlett, why did you say those things to her?" He looked at me, his eyes full of disappointment. "I already explained to you that I don't like her. Mia has been keeping her distance from me, so why did you still humiliate her behind her back?" I quietly watched Ethan become hysterical, then picked up the diary. But as I read, I couldn't help but laugh. Mia wrote that I not only shamed her behind her back for shamelessly chasing after Ethan, but also instigated others to bully her. She even mentioned the time I met with her alone and told her to go back and study. She wrote, "A casual remark from someone in a high position can make the mud that's already in the dark feel even more ashamed of itself. Perhaps I shouldn't have existed in this world in the first place." I tossed the notebook to Ethan, my tone calm. "Do you really believe what she said?" Ethan leaned against the tree, laughing sarcastically. "Does it even matter if I believe it or not? Scarlett, Mia has depression. Who would joke about something like this?" I didn't say anything. Instead, I walked up to Ethan and slapped him. Ethan was stunned for a moment. When he came to his senses, he grabbed my wrist tightly and said, "Scarlett, when you do something wrong, you have to admit it. I used to indulge all your little tantrums, but this time is different. This time, it's a matter of life and death. Come on, you're going to apologize to Mia with me." I shook my hand but couldn't break free, so I simply used my other hand to slap him again. "I didn't do any of those things. Believe it or not, you want me to apologize to her. In your dreams." I turned around but tears fell uncontrollably. How did it come to this? Ethan started going to Mia's house every day under the pretext of taking care of her on my behalf and apologizing to her. When I heard about it, I felt so sick I almost threw up. Ethan, I knew him too well. He was just using me as an excuse to finally see Mia openly. Ethan's family lived right above mine. Occasionally, I would run into him on the stairs when I went to school. Every time, he would look at me as if he wanted to say something. I knew this meant he wanted to make peace with me, but I thought he was dreaming. He couldn't let go of Mia, but he also didn't want to break up with me. He was simply sick in the head. One day, I was practicing problems at home when my phone kept ringing non-stop. I opened the messages and saw that the other person had sent me many photos of Ethan and Mia. In the photos, Ethan was smiling at Mia tenderly, his eyes filled with affection he himself hadn't even noticed. And Mia, as if she knew I would see the photos, smiled provocatively at the camera from an angle Ethan couldn't see. So, where did she seem like she had depression? My fingers gripped the phone tightly as I waited for the other person to speak. Fortunately, they quickly sent another message. "Mom, say goodbye to your 17-year-old true love. Next, I'm going to tell Ethan a truth that will make him completely leave you." It was Evelyn. I didn't pay too much attention to it, only curious about how disgraceful my future self must be for Evelyn to go so far as to erase her own existence to stop me and Ethan from being together. But her efforts weren't in vain. The ending was really going to be as she wished. It's just that whenever I thought about Evelyn disappearing, my heart would ache dully. Was it really the work of blood ties? Evelyn was efficient. The next day after school, Ethan pulled me into an empty classroom. Of course, besides me and him, Evelyn and Mia were also there. Ethan didn't waste words. With red eyes, he immediately demanded, "Scarlett, when we were spending the summer at the countryside as kids and I accidentally fell into a deep pit, who exactly saved me?" I was stunned for a moment before realizing he was talking about that incident. At that time, Ethan had just started middle school. On his way to school, he got into a car accident, causing him to be unable to stand for a long time. During that period, his temper became irritable and strange. He would throw things around at the slightest dissatisfaction. So no one wanted to approach him anymore, including Uncle and Auntie Shang, who would avoid him whenever they could. But I was just a fool. I thought Ethan was just too sad. As long as I stayed with him until he could stand up again, one day he would return to being the gentle Ethan I knew. So I endured his bad temper and started accompanying him to rehabilitation training every day. Sometimes, I would even tell him jokes to cheer him up. Of course, I also didn't forget to explain the lessons the teachers had taught at school to him every day. During that time, I took double the notes. But Ethan still had a gloomy face. Until the summer, when we stayed at Ethan's grandmother's house in the countryside. I remember that time, for some reason, he insisted on going out alone in his wheelchair. But when evening came, and there was still no sign of him returning, I finally got anxious, and went out to look for him, only to find him lying next to a deep pit. I anxiously called Ethan's name, and he finally woke up slowly. Seeing that it was me in front of him, he hugged me with red-rimmed eyes. "I'll listen to you and live well." At this moment, Ethan was still looking at me in pain, wanting an answer. I said, "I don't know. At that time, I only found you lying beside the deep pit." But Mia looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You're obviously lying. You deceived Ethan. If it wasn't for you, how could Ethan and I have missed so many years? I thought he always remembered me." I looked at them coldly, enunciating every word. "I'll say it again. I really don't know who saved him. Ethan woke up and didn't say anything, so how would I know what happened to him?" I laughed mockingly. "And I never said I was the one who saved him. Whatever he imagined has nothing to do with me. I, Scarlett, would never stoop so low as to steal someone else's things." Enough. Ethan finally couldn't stand it. He looked at me, his face full of disappointment. "Scarlett, Scarlett, all these years I was wrong to like you." I was silent for a long time, then suddenly laughed. "Ethan, I'm really curious. If it had been a dog passing by that saved you back then, would you have fallen in love with it too? Your love is really too cheap. So cheap that he didn't even deserve me." Evelyn was right. I should indeed say goodbye to my 17-year-old true love. In the end, Ethan left with a crying Mia. And I, exhausted, leaned against the wall, my mind in a mess. A soft gasp suddenly sounded. I immediately turned around, only to see Evelyn, who had been forgotten by everyone, standing in the corner, her nose gushing with blood. I was so scared I wanted to call an ambulance, but she stopped me. Having no choice, I could only take her to the bathroom to clean her up a bit. After we left the school gate, I watched Evelyn standing there in a daze. For some inexplicable reason, I felt a hard-to-describe ache in my heart. On a whim, I walked back to her. "Do you want to stay at my place tonight?" I asked bluntly, and she hesitated to answer. But fortunately, she still agreed. When we got home, my mother had already prepared a table of food and was sitting on the couch with my father, waiting for me to come back. I told them Evelyn was my classmate and would be staying here tonight. They both said it was no problem and even held Evelyn's hand the whole time, seeming to like her very much. I rarely saw the usually prickly Evelyn being so obedient and quiet. Suddenly, my mother exclaimed in surprise, looking at her this way, "Evelyn's nose and mouth actually have some resemblance to Scarlett's. And that little mole between her eyebrows, Scarlett used to have one too, but unfortunately she removed it." I was stunned for a moment, then followed their gaze to look at Evelyn. Evelyn also looked at me with a complex expression. At first, I only noticed the ways Evelyn resembled Ethan, but I didn't realize she also had features that looked like mine. This feeling was very hard to describe. In this world, apart from my parents, there was actually someone else who shared my bloodline. Afraid that my parents would notice something, after dinner, I pulled Evelyn back to my room. Perhaps because she was sleeping beside me, tonight, I had an extremely long dream. In the dream, Ethan and I got married. He still doted on me like when we were young, treating me like some fragile treasure. We had many sweet moments, really staying in love forever like I had imagined before. Until we had our first fight after getting married. It started because he didn't agree with me going out to work after having a daughter. That time, we argued fiercely, even alarming our parents on both sides. Because of this, Ethan didn't come home for many days. But in the end, he was the first to apologize to me. He told me very sadly that he didn't want me to be so tired, having to take care of our daughter and go out to work at the same time. He said he was completely capable of supporting me, and I only needed to be his princess. I still softened in the end and agreed to him, completely returning to the family. At first, Ethan would always come home on time and even bring back various gifts for me. But gradually, he started coming back later and later, and even had the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his body. I got suspicious and decided to make a surprise visit to his company one day, only to see Mia holding onto Ethan's arm, talking and laughing. The Mia in my dream had completely shed her timidity from high school. She had taken off her thick glasses and put on exquisite makeup, appearing confident and poised. When they saw me, they both hurriedly sat further apart in a fluster. Mia greeted me, but I ignored her and looked at Ethan instead. Ethan was obviously flustered. After kicking Mia out of the office, he held my hand and explained. If Ethan still felt some guilt towards me in the beginning, later on, he gradually became impatient with me and even compared me to Mia. He said I wasn't as strong as Mia, not as confident and composed as her. During that time, my mother happened to be hospitalized due to illness, and I was under a lot of stress. When he said that, I broke down on the spot. It was also at that time that I met Jasper Sie. He was my mother's attending physician. He told me, "Scarlett is Scarlett, and doesn't need to compare herself to others." Just this one sentence brought me back to life. At the end of the dream, I saw Jasper extending his hand to me. He said, "I've always been here. You only need to turn around to see me." This dream was incredibly realistic, making me start to believe that this might be my somewhat tragic future. When I woke up, there were still traces of undried tears on my face. Looking up, I saw Evelyn sitting at the desk, staring in a daze at a group photo on the table. In the photo, I was holding my parents' hands, smiling brilliantly. "Evelyn, why did you lie to me?" I suddenly spoke up. Evelyn was startled. When she came to her senses, she stared at me blankly. I smiled bitterly. It was obviously Ethan who cheated. Evelyn jumped to her feet. "How did you know?" I didn't answer her but looked into her slightly panicked eyes and said word by word, "Why did you really come back? Do you really hate me that much? You'd rather erase your own existence than let Ethan and Mia be together." Evelyn lowered her head, not letting anyone see her expression, but her voice trembled slightly. "That's right, I hate you the most." With that, she ran out of the room. My fingers gripped until they hurt. I really couldn't understand why she did this. Ethan and Mia got together. When I heard this news, I was at the Sie family's house attending Tiffany's birthday party. I casually found an excuse and left the lively front hall. I felt very uncomfortable under everyone's pitying gazes. Yes, who would have thought that Mia, whom they used to look down on, would really win over the campus prince of number 1 high? And this was when Ethan already had me, his childhood sweetheart. Without realizing it, I arrived at the Sia family's small garden, only to see Jasper sitting on the swing reading a book. The breeze blew through the young man's black bangs, revealing his usually calm eyes. There was also a box of candy on his knees, which had already been eaten more than half by him, judging from the looks of it. I couldn't help but smile. This young master unexpectedly had a very contrasting side to him. Perhaps hearing the noise, Jasper looked up. Seeing me staring at his candy and smiling, his ears suddenly turned red, but he still maintained a calm appearance. "Want some?" I nodded and took the candy from his hand, then sat down on the swing next to him. Suddenly, I thought of that dream. I asked him, if in the future, I become unremarkable and lose my brilliance, will anyone still like me? I knew my question was a bit out of the blue, but Jasper still answered me very seriously. "Definitely." My heart involuntarily beat faster. I asked again, "Why?" Jasper smiled, and that smile was like the brilliant stars constantly twinkling in the night. I will never forget the confident and poised eyes of Scarlett when I first saw her. In that debate, even though number 1 high was already at a disadvantage, she still refused to admit defeat and kept expressing her opinions. Although she lost by a narrow margin, she still won everyone's applause. I've always believed that such a person will never become ordinary. Even if there's a temporary setback, in the end, she will definitely regroup and find her own brilliance again. Jasper looked into my eyes, but his tone was very gentle. "But actually, even if there are many more people who love you, it's not as good as first loving yourself. Never doubt yourself because of what others say." My eyes felt hot, but my mind suddenly became clear. Looking up at the azure sky, I said softly, "Thank you, Jasper Sia." In addition to gifts, I also invited Tiffany to go to the amusement park. The two girls had a crazy fun day, feeling particularly happy. When it was time to go home, Uncle Chin came to pick us up with Jasper, but Tiffany had to leave first to attend a private birthday party specially prepared for her by her parents. I originally didn't want to trouble them to send me back, but Jasper suddenly put the bunny ears headband he bought on my head. "Let's go, it's no trouble." But as soon as we reached the bottom of my building, I saw Ethan and Mia beside him. The two of them were talking intimately, and just as their lips were about to touch, Ethan suddenly saw me. Somehow, he pushed Mia away and instantly looked a bit flustered. Mia's face immediately changed, but she still quickly clung to Ethan's arm, looking at me with a provocative expression. "What a coincidence, Scarlett." With that, she glanced at Jasper beside me, then paused, her eyes filled with complex emotions. "You found someone new so quickly. Good, saves you from constantly thinking about someone else's boyfriend." When Ethan heard her say that, his brows furrowed deeply, and his tone inexplicably turned cold. "Scarlett, who is this?" I didn't want to pay attention to them, but I was really too disgusted by them. "What does it have to do with you? Also, don't call me Scarlett anymore." I looked at Mia, who had a distorted face, and raised my eyebrows. "I'm afraid your girlfriend won't be happy about it." With that, I lifted my foot to leave, but Ethan stopped me, insisting that I explain to him. Jasper immediately stepped in front of me to protect me. He was half a head taller than Ethan, and when he looked at Ethan with unfriendly eyes, his aura was very intimidating. Ethan couldn't stop me anymore, but he looked at me unwillingly, while Jasper flicked the little bunny ears on my head and chuckled. "Go on up, little bunny." My face inexplicably turned a bit red, and I hurried upstairs. In the evening, Ethan knocked on my door. Outside the door, he had his usual smile, his tone light. "My parents aren't home tonight. Can I come eat at your place?" If it were before, I would have happily pulled him in, but now, looking at his face, I only felt annoyed. "Ethan, don't you think you're being ridiculous? Don't tell me you're with Mia now, but still haven't let go of me." Ethan still maintained his smile, but a hint of pain flashed in his eyes. "Scarlett, so we can't even be friends anymore?" "No, we can't." I refused bluntly, then slammed the door hard. But after a while, I opened the door again. Ethan's originally dim eyes suddenly lit up. He was about to say something when he saw me throw a box at his feet. "These are the things you gave me over the years. Take them back. You don't need to return what I gave you. I don't want them anymore." Ethan stared at the things on the ground in a daze. He bent down and picked up the box on top. Opening it, inside was a crystal necklace, the swan pendant still shining. He asked me, "What about this? You don't want it either. You liked it so much." I looked at him indifferently and said, "It's different now. It's dirty." The Ethan who used to know my intentions with just one glance from me was gone after all. I didn't tell him that I had actually found out he secretly ate instant noodles for a month to save money. so he would never know how much I wanted to grow old with him at that time. The moment I closed the door, I saw Ethan tightly clutching that necklace, his face full of confusion and pain. My life seemed to have returned to its original state, just without an Ethan and with an extra Jasper. Jasper would send me back along with Tiffany when picking her up, and would also invite me to study together at the library on weekends. Finally, when Jasper invited me to the library again, I couldn't help but ask him, "Jasper, are you pursuing me?" Otherwise, with his personality, he shouldn't be so proactive in inviting the same person. His eyes revealed confusion. Yeah, isn't it obvious? I was speechless. Whose dates are always at the library? And every time he argued with me about different solutions to math problems with a serious face, it only made people think he saw me as a study rival. I sighed, tiptoed, and whispered in his ear, "How about we go to the beach together next week? I heard there will be fireworks at night." Jasper's face immediately turned red. He tightly pursed his lips and nodded very hard. I finally smiled with satisfaction. As soon as Jasper sent me back home, a heavy rain started pouring down. Looking at the heavy curtain of rain, I thought, I haven't seen Evelyn in a long time. Or rather, is she still around? A sense of loss surged in my heart, with a hint of faint bitterness. "Scarlett." A voice suddenly came from behind. I turned around and saw it was Ethan. He had a sorrowful face, but his eyes were gleaming with joy. "Scarlett, Mia and I broke up." I was stunned for a moment, then said indifferently, "It has nothing to do with me. You don't need to come tell me on purpose." With that, I was about to go upstairs, but Ethan suddenly hugged me from behind. A faint smell of alcohol lingered in my nose. I frowned, feeling a bit disgusted. "Ethan, let go." Ethan's voice carried a sob. "Scarlett, I was wrong. I only know now that I've always liked you. I'm not at all used to life without you by my side. Can you forgive me?" By the end, he was already crying uncontrollably. But I was completely unmoved, only stomping hard on his foot. Taking advantage of his painful release, I stood on the stairs, looking down at him from above. "Honestly, Ethan, what you're doing now makes me think you're sick and disgusting." Thinking of what he and Mia would do in the future, I harbored an even deeper hatred for him. "Ethan, maybe I should even thank you for leaving me." No longer looking at his pained expression, I turned and left. But unintentionally, I saw a familiar figure in the pouring rain. I was excited to see her face clearly, but in the blink of an eye, she was gone again. I thought with a bitter smile, have I been thinking about her too much lately? Ethan was caught by Mia's family's debt collectors. They had their minds set on taking revenge on him, so they were very heavy-handed. He was hit on the head by them, and went straight into the operating room. When my mother told me this news, I was discussing with Tiffany about where to go for summer vacation. Looking at the red light on above the operating room, I thought of the message he had sent me just a few hours ago. "Scarlett, summer is almost here. How about we go to the beach together?" Since the last time I saw him, he sent me messages every day, but I never replied and even blocked him. He didn't know that I already had someone to go to the beach with. Ethan's parents were crying in pain on the bench outside the operating room, and my parents were comforting them while also shedding tears from time to time. I stared at the white walls of the hospital in a daze, hoping that Ethan would be okay. Although I hated him, I didn't want him to die. Suddenly, at the end of the corridor, I saw Evelyn in a white dress. I walked towards her, and she held my hand, showing a gentle smile I had never seen before. "Mom, today is my birthday. Can you make me a bowl of noodles again?" I was stunned for a moment, looking at her somewhat expectant eyes, and finally agreed. Outside the hospital, I borrowed the kitchen of a nearby small restaurant and quickly made a bowl of noodles for Evelyn. The hazy steam blurred her features, making it hard for me to see her expression. But she suddenly spoke up. I was the one who revealed Ethan's location to those people. She raised her head. "I'm the reason Ethan is now lying in the hospital, his life hanging in the balance." I looked at her abruptly, with too many questions I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask, weren't you always helping Ethan? Didn't you always hate me? Why are you doing this now? But in the end, I just felt utterly exhausted. I seemed to never understand anything Evelyn did or said. Perhaps because I had spent too much energy today, I actually fell asleep with my head on the table. And I had a dream about the future that I hadn't had in a long time. But this time, it was all about my daughter, Evelyn. I saw her as a newborn, opening her grape-like big eyes and smiling at me happily. I saw her at 5 years old, holding a cake made of Play-Doh and singing, "Happy Birthday," to me when Ethan forgot my birthday. I saw her at 10 years old, raising her eyebrows proudly at the parent-teacher conference and saying, "I have the best mom in the world." I saw her at 13, holding a knife and fiercely pointing it at her father when Ethan found out it wasn't me who saved him back then and slapped me for Mia. Finally, it was her at 15. She went to the hospital to find Jasper and looked at him seriously, saying, "If you're not good to my mom in the future, I definitely won't let you off." Jasper, wearing a white coat, didn't laugh at the girl's somewhat childish words, but instead bent down and held out his pinky. "I understand. Let's pinky swear." Evelyn held out her hand and Pinky swore with him, smiling brilliantly. After leaving the hospital, she specifically found a place with no one around and took out an old-fashioned cell phone. "Okay, if you can really take me back to the past, then take me back to before my dad confessed to my mom." Amazingly, the phone spoke. "As you wish. But why don't you directly tell your mother about the future situation, instead of choosing to promote their separation by slandering her?" Evelyn was in a daze for a long time, and finally, she smiled. "You don't know, my mom is the kindest and softest-hearted person in the world. If I can't make her hate me at the beginning, she will definitely stop me. She would even walk the old path again for my sake." Now, I finally knew Evelyn's biggest secret. That is, she loves me. She has always loved me. My tears suddenly poured out, and I wanted to reach out and grab my daughter in that illusion, but I could only watch helplessly as she got farther and farther away. I looked at her, who was becoming more and more transparent, and choked out, "Evelyn, would you still be willing to be mommy's daughter in the next life?" She looked at me and smiled innocently. "Of course I'm willing. Evelyn may not be a kind girl, but in mommy's eyes, she has always been a good daughter." I shook my head and finally tried hard to raise a smile. "I'm sorry and thank you." When I woke up, I looked at the empty seat across from me, tears streaming down my face. I knew that this time-traveling journey of love had come to a complete end. The doctor said that although Ethan's life was saved, it would be hard for him to wake up in the future. I heard them say that when he was sent to the hospital covered in blood, he was still tightly clutching that crystal swan necklace in his hand. I listened and just stared at the sky for a while in a daze. In the distance, Tiffany waved at me, smiling and saying, "Scarlett, let's go play at the beach together." Beside her, Jasper also looked at me, his eyes gentle. I stood up and ran towards them. "Let's go." The next summer, I welcomed graduation with all the high school seniors. As summer was about to end, I entered university with them. 4 years later, I graduated from law school with excellent grades and successfully became an outstanding lawyer. Jasper and I also got our marriage certificate, and both our parents were very satisfied. My greatest joy in my daily life was to tease Tiffany into calling me Auntie. Every time, she would chase me and hit me, shouting about when exactly I got on board with Jasper. In the 3rd year of our marriage, I got pregnant. Jasper respected my opinion very much. He said that if I wanted to continue working in the future, I could continue, and if I wanted to stay at home, I could stay at home. He told me with a straight face, "At worst, I'll quit. Anyway, Tiffany is in the company now. I'd rather be your personal house husband at home." When Tiffany heard this, the uncle and niece started another round of chaos. When I was 7 months pregnant, my mother told me that Ethan had woken up. She said, "After all, you were together for so many years. If you have time, go see him." I was silent for a moment, then nodded. On a weekend, Jasper and I went to the hospital together, but unexpectedly saw Mia, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, in the lobby. I remember that the school had no choice but to expel Mia because her family's creditors often came to make trouble. I heard that she ultimately didn't take the college entrance exam and instead went to a small city to work and pay off debts. Looking at Mia now, I saw that she was wearing an old outfit washed until it turned white, holding the hand of a little boy, her expression weary. But when she saw me, she still showed the same resentful expression as before. "Scarlett." She clenched her fists unwillingly. "Why? Why do you have such good luck? Why aren't you the one down on your luck now?" I found it ridiculous. When she most needed to work hard, she neglected her studies to fight over Ethan. Now that her life wasn't good, she turned around and blamed others for having good luck. I felt there was no need to pay attention to her, and walked away holding Jasper's hand. When I got to Ethan's ward, I saw him staring out the window at the sunlight in a daze. Time had also left quite a few traces on his face, but the gloom in his eyes suddenly dissipated when he saw me. His voice trembling, he called me Scarlett. I had completely let go of the past and nodded at him. But just as the corners of his mouth lifted slightly, he saw Jasper behind me, and then he saw my protruding belly. Ethan looked at me in sorrow for a long, long time. Finally, he closed his eyes and said softly, "Scarlett, I wish you happiness." I touched my belly and showed him a genuine smile. "Thank you." 3 more months passed and I gave birth to a daughter. Her eyes were as bright as stars. She was tiny, curled up in Jasper's arms, making the usually cold and serious man unconsciously soften his gaze. But when I saw the little mole between her eyebrows, my eyes suddenly became moist.